In this episode, we tried a game on a 9-year-old Dell. We talk about the worst game we've ever played, and I become very out of focus. Alright, thank you guys very much. Welcome to the Daily Goat Show. We have a lot to go over tonight, so let's start with the video. This is Dave, and Dave is a PC. A Dell, to be specific, and he has been for nearly 9 years. And it got me thinking, can this old dog play modern games? But obviously, it's going to need a little bit of help. As it is, it's a 1.8 GHz dual-core Pentium processor, 1 GB of RAM and onboard video. Not exactly a good choice for modern gaming. But then it's a PC. And being a PC, it's upgradable. But being pre-built, there are limitations. The CPU will remain, as well as the motherboard, limiting us to DDR2 RAM and slower all-around performance potential. But we are making a few enhancements. First off, Dave was donated to me, and it lived its past life around cigarettes. And, like any computer that smoked around, it collected a lot of nasties. So the first thing I did was clean it. Some Windex, disinfectant, paper towels, and a vacuum later, it was relatively stain-free. But it still needed a final touch to help get rid of the smell. So the panels went into the dishwasher, I cleaned the case fan, and the power supply, which was a Pandora's box of smoke odor, was tossed in favor of a clean one. Now it's as clean as the day it rolled off the factory floor. Ish. The power supply was also swapped because it wouldn't be enough. We also included an extra 4 gigs of RAM for a total of 5, and the PCI Express slot was filled with a EVGA 750 Ti superclocked. I wanted to start things off with a video card that was closer to the machine's era. But sadly, I no longer had my 9600 GT, and I didn't fancy buying another one. So the 750 will have to suffice. The BFG 450 watt power supply would be perfect for the system, and even give some headroom should I feel like seeing how a more powerful card performs. More on that later. So in addition to the beefier power supply, I also installed a 250 gig additional hard drive just to put the games on so I can keep the OS and the game separate. Instead of installing Windows Vista, I installed Windows 10 64-bit Pro on it as well, just to give it that extra bit of edge. So, it's all cleaned up, it's all put back together, and it's ready for action. Let's get started. So what's in store for David? Well, we'll be looking at how Grand Theft Auto 5, Rise of the Tomb Raider, Dark Souls 3, Bioshock Infinite, and Tomb Raider Anniversary run, because I figure Tomb Raider Anniversary is much closer to this machine's era when it came out. Now yes, the 750 is actually not the best choice, even on a much faster CPU, for some of the games, but it will still play them, and it's a good place to start anyway. I should note that this PC struggles running high-definition 60 frame per second YouTube videos, so what hope does it have running a game? Well, let's find out. So the first thing I noticed is that even with a nearly 9-year-old hard drive, the boot up time is surprisingly quick, but that's mainly due to Windows 10 and its witchcraft-like optimization. Load time for games, however, are astronomical. Now before we get into the results, I should mention that the gameplay footage that you're going to see is actually not from Dave. You see, I did record gameplay footage from Dave, and it was actually quite interesting. I really enjoyed looking at it because some of the results were surprising. However, at the very end of the testing, as dramatic as Dave was going to have it, he had a heart attack, and his hard drive died. I couldn't recover the footage from the hard drive, unfortunately. The hard drive is complete toast. So I apologize for that. The footage that you're seeing is just pre-recorded stuff that I had already done with my main PC. Running the benchmark for Rise of the Tomb Raider took longer than it took to clean and upgrade the system actually. However, we did find a result. I copied over the game straight from one computer to this one. Because of that, the graphic properties carried over, and the first run of Tomb Raider benchmarks averaged about 25 frames per second on high settings, which was actually pretty impressive, I thought. However, this meant I had to lower the settings to try and achieve the goal of 30 plus frames per second and sit through the test again, which sometimes crashes. Gameplay, however, feels fine. There is some stuttering, which is not completely unexpected, but overall, it's quite playable. Now, I was unable to run the benchmark again, once I lowered the settings, it just kept crashing, but gameplay averaged right around 25 to 30 frames per second on its lowest settings.
To this end, I am at thy side.
Next up was Dark Souls 3, and at max settings it ran just about as you'd expect. Not well, But if I set it to its lowest settings and lowered the resolution to 720, then it became perfectly playable, similarly to what we saw on the Surface Pro when I tested that a little while ago. But we're interested in frames per second, right? Well, it ran, but not at blistering speeds. We're talking about 20 to 24 frames per second with dips down to 15. It's certainly playable, but not something that would be easy to live with in the long term. As with Rise of the Tomb Raider, there is all sorts of stuttering as the 750 was waiting to be fed information from the dual-core processor. Moving on to Grand Theft Auto V, we see much of the same. I did not run the benchmark because it kept crashing the system, so only gameplay was measured. I left it on the default settings based on the built-in hardware detection, and it ran at about 20 or so frames per second, with a few jumps to 24. There's all sorts of stuttering again from the poor little CPU, so I lowered every setting to the lowest it can go, and was able to pick up about 5 frames per second across the board. But the stuttering remained, which is not surprising. Next up is Bioshock Infinite, which surprisingly loaded quite fast and the benchmark worked fine. It actually ran at about 30 frames per second most of the time, with parts getting up as high as 40 to 50. Now this is on medium settings, and the stuttering that was present in the previous games was virtually non-existent. The game actually played very well, and I'd imagine a full playthrough would be quite enjoyable. Last is a game a little closer to this computer's era, Tomb Raider Anniversary, and we ran it just because we wanted to see what it would do, and this game ran perfectly, upwards of 200 frames per second, with the average being around 160 to 170. The lowest hit was 120, but only briefly. But it's no surprise really, the game was made to run on a CPU like what's in Dave, and GPUs of that era. A GTX 750 is way overkill for this game, and it shows. So that's all well and good, right? But what about stepping things up to a more powerful card? Will it make a difference, or is the CPU completely tapped out at this point? I bet there isn't much, if any, more performance to be found here. However, let's find out with our good friend, the GTX 960 for the win by EVGA. Here's what we found. We found that Dave hates 900 series graphic cards. Immediately after post, Windows 10 threw a memory error and went into an auto-repair boot loop. So I took it back out and put the 750 back in. It booted up perfectly, so I tried the 960 again, and the machine flipped out and went all Andrew Ryan on me again.
No.
Pushing my luck, I installed a 970 because why not?
No.
Dave hates 900 series cards apparently. I even went so far to wipe the system and install a fresh copy of Windows with the 960 in. It installed fine and let me install the drivers. Well, I started a driver install anyway, halfway through the install.
No.
So, may as well push our luck and pop in the Big Daddy. Which proved to be a waste of time, as Dave also seems to hate 10 series cards. The 10 series card I understood, but I was a little confused on the 900 series cards, as it's the same Maxwell architecture as the 750, more or less. But regardless, it wasn't happy. Looking into it, I found that some older motherboards may need a BIOS update to run newer cards, which makes sense, and given my background in computers, I should have thought of. I did not. Unfortunately, Dave is running the latest BIOS for him. But this isn't really a bad thing, as it seems a more powerful card would do nothing for gameplay. The little dual-core Pentium had a hell of a time just feeding the 750. I can't imagine a 960 or higher would make any difference. So, there you have it. Can you game on a nearly 9-year-old Dell? Well, yeah, absolutely. But would you want to?
No.
Well, at least not for modern titles. Alright, welcome back. Now, next I want to talk to you about one of the worst games I ever played that I actually finished, completed it to the very end. I'm not sure why I played so much of it because of how bad it was, but regardless, here we go. This is that game. It's called Lichdom Battlemage, and it's made by a company called Xavier. And the first thing you should know is that it's shit. In it, you play as the Dragon. And the Dragon can be either a guy or a girl, you get to decide. And whoever you don't pick becomes your partner and talks to you during the game. Also, they die at the end, so essentially you are choosing who you'd rather see get killed. But I can assure you that after a few hours, you will want everybody to be dead. Everybody. At the core of the game is a first-person shooter with spells instead of a gun. It's set in a huge fantasy world and you can supposedly craft your own spells. Sounds good, right? Well, it all falls apart once you start. But of course, the game never actually starts. It just loads. That's it. That's basically the game. But eventually, you do get into gameplay, and this is where you get to feast your eyes on the graphics. Or at least you would if this was a normal game. But Lichdom on Xbox One doesn't actually have any graphics. None that you can see anyway. This is actual gameplay. It's recorded straight off the Xbox. If it wasn't for the inclusion of a Dead Space style pathfinding bird, I never would have gotten past the first area. And I'm not even joking. The game does have a few areas where the designers could actually be bothered to include graphics, but most of the game is played as a first-person David Attenborough simulator with you just following the bird. It got so tiring that the last few hours of the game I didn't actually fight anything unless I had to. I couldn't see them, so I just followed the damn bird. Not that it would have been any fun, as they were just spell equivalent bullet sponges anyway. The checkpoint system starts off generous, but as you get further into the game you realize they become more and more precious. And you will need them. Because there are no graphics, you can't see the floor. Because you can't see the floor, you will fall to your death. Luckily, there are no loading screens when you die, but there are unfairly placed checkpoints. In the areas where you can actually see what's going on, the frame rate dips so low it becomes the world's weirdest PowerPoint presentation. And this is after the patch the game requires in order to even be playable at all. I should mention that this game is also available on PlayStation 4 and PC, and the PS4 suffers similar but slightly different performance issues as the Xbox version. However, the PS4 version actually has graphics and is playable because of that. Why the Xbox version is so dark, I will never know, but the PC version plays very well, and is the one you should go after. It still has annoying gameplay elements, but at least it's completely playable. So, Lichdom Battlemage on the Xbox One? Easily one of the worst games I've ever completed. Alright, so I have been a little busy recently buying games, and actually, to be honest, I typically tend to pick up 1 to 2 games a week. But here's some recent ones that I've picked up, kind of all in a batch. So the first one that I got was Dead Rising 3 on the Xbox One. Yeah, this came out a little while ago, but I had not picked it up yet, and my Xbox One was pretty much just a exclusives machine for the most part, so I decided to get it. It's not available on PS4, so let's get it. Next up is Crimes and Punishments, Sherlock Holmes. Now this was available on the PS4 as well, but the reason that I got it for the Xbox One is because GameStop had this for $10 cheaper on the Xbox One. So while, yeah, I wanted the Xbox One to kind of be the exclusive only machine, you can't really argue with the $10 discount. So I picked that up as well. I also got for the PS4, Earth Defense Force 4.1, The Shadow of New Despair. Now, I haven't tried this one yet, but I'm a huge fan of the series. I have just about every one in the series and I've played through them, even the PS Vita version, which is actually really, really good. So, can't wait to jump into this. Next up, Deus Ex Mankind Divided. Now, I almost didn't get this because, to be honest with you, I didn't really like Human Revolution all that much. But I have played about 3 hours of this so far, and so far so good. I kind of like it. I'm not really sure if I'm sold on the main character. You know, he sounds like an 80-year-old guy that's been smoking a pack a day for the last couple of years. Kind of takes me out of it. But otherwise, so far, really good. You can play stealth or action-oriented. I, of course, am going in guns blazing. I also picked up Ratchet & Clank on the PS4, which is based off of the movie, which is based off of the game. And I actually never played the original Ratchet & Clank. In fact, the only Ratchet & Clank game that I've ever played is one that was released on the PlayStation Portable, and I never finished it, so I'm excited to get in here. From what I've seen of it, the graphics, the art style, the animation, everything looks beautiful. So I love a good platforming game. Can't really go wrong with Insomniac, so really looking forward to starting that one. Next, we're moving on to the PlayStation Vita. I finally got myself a copy of Tearaway. Now, I've been looking for this for a while, and my local GameStop, they've had it in stock for a long time, but they always had it in the generic case. So I finally traveled to another GameStop as I was out and about, and I found one in the original case, so I had to snatch that up. Next up, this came out today. At the time, at least time of filming today, this came out, Trails of Cold Steel 2. So I'm really looking forward to putting this in. I'm just about at the end of the first one, so I can't wait to see how the adventure continues. And then this I actually picked up a little while ago, but I don't know if I officially announced that I got it, because when I made my Vita video, everybody said, pick this up. I missed this game. This game should have been on my recommended list, so I'm going to pop it in as soon as I finish up some of my other backlog games, and we're going to get into it. Now, moving on to the original PlayStation, I picked up Star Wars Rebel Assault 2. This is I used to have this on PC a long time ago, and I completely forgot about it. And I was watching something online recently. I don't remember which YouTuber I was watching, but I was watching somebody online recently, and they mentioned this, and I was like, oh yeah, I should get that. And I decided to get the PS1 version of it, mainly because I found this for $3. So $3, you can't really go wrong with it. So I'm really looking forward to jumping back into this and playing it, and to see how playable it is on the PS1. So I played it on the computer with keyboard and mouse, so we'll see how it translates over to a gamepad. Next up is PS2. I got Escape from Monkey Island. I had this. I actually still have this on PC, and I love the Monkey Island games. The PlayStation 2 version is very, very buggy, so you need to save often, because it will just, for whatever reason, crash and go back to the beginning of the game. So make sure you save your game probably every 10 minutes or so, and you should be fine. But good game. Next, I picked up Oni for the PlayStation 2. I recently bought an Xbox One. I got Halo 5, and then the Master Chief Collection. I was like, I may as well get a couple other Bungie games. So this is Bungie and Rockstar kind of teaming up to do this one. And I was kind of hemming and hawing between this and the PC version. I was like, I want to get a physical copy. I couldn't find a affordable version of this on PC, at least not locally. And then last, I got Ridge Racer 5. I won't last for the PlayStation 2 anyway. And the reason that I picked this up is, I think it was Digital Foundry just did a retro look at this, and they mentioned that this was the first game created for the PlayStation 2. And it's kind of, I didn't know that. And as a kind of a game collector, it's like, well, if it's the first game that they made for the PlayStation 2, I got to have it. So there it is. And then now, last but certainly not least, actually still in the shrink wrap, I picked up a dual pack for the PSP of Hot Shots Golf Open Tee, which I already have the digital version of, and Hot Shots Tennis Get a Grip. So still in the shrink wrap, but the next trip that I take somewhere, which is actually coming up next month, I'm going to pop this open, I'm going to take it with me, and I'm going to play some golf and some tennis on the go. So that wraps it up. Those are all of the games that I've picked up lately, at least kind of in bulk. Even though, like I said, I typically pick one or two up a week. I try to anyway. Just like some old, good $3 to $5 games that I see either at local stores, or if I see like something on Amazon really cheap, I'll pick that up. So yeah, there you have it. Alright, well guys, that is the show for this evening. I want to thank you so much for watching. Good night.